So it's been a little while since I posted a video. June's been pretty busy, but managed to get some reading done in this month. In fact, this is all except one of the books that I've read in the month of June. So I want to show you everything that I finished reading. I'm still reading a few other things, but this is everything that I finished in the month of June. All right, first up, we have the Mammoth Book of Native Americans, the story of America's original inhabitants in all its beauty, magic, truth, and tragedy, edited by John E. Lewis. This is a whole set of books, the Mammoth Book of, and you can fill in the blank with a lot of other things. But I read this. It's a pretty big book, but I really loved it. Could not put this book down. The Mammoth Book of Native Americans, it really starts, I guess, really way back before Europeans even started coming over to North America. It talks about the tribes, and then it talks about how slowly but surely Johnny Lewis, he edits things together and he works his way from the East Coast all the way out west, and he shows how slowly but surely over time there were these battles, these fights between Native Americans and whether it be maybe the Spanish, the French, the English, or Americans themselves. Some pretty sad stuff in here. If you're not familiar with Native American history, some pretty sad stuff in this book. They did things to people they should not have done, cruel at times. Also, Americans did things very cruel. Oftentimes cheated them out of their land. They would make a promise, this is your land, we won't come over here, and then immediately Americans would start breaking that promise. Just a really sad story. Very interesting history, but it's a tough read. But one that is well worth knowing. All right, the second book I read this month, this is a work of fiction, Above the Fire by Michael O'Donnell. A powerful story of parenthood and grief, nature and civilization, and the raw essentials of life. Really love this book. I actually did a little research. This is actually Michael O'Donnell's first book, and it was really good. It's a story of a father and his son. They go up in the mountains. They're camping, survivalist camping, and civilization just goes haywire while they're gone. And so they stay up in the mountains and see what happens. It's a really good read. I really enjoyed this book. It was very interesting. Above the Fire was the first fiction book I've actually read in quite a while, and it was really good. It's not very long, just a little over 200 pages. I got through it pretty quickly. As a parent, as a father, this really tugs at your heartstrings. Michael O'Donnell does a very good job with that. The ending is interesting. I won't give it away. I really hope, the way that it's written, I really hope that there's another one coming. I could also see, though, by the ending that's just it, because sometimes with stories we don't have everything wrapped up nice and neat like we'd like it. But I really hope he's left the door open for a sequel or maybe even for a series. But if not, I do understand the ending. So Above the Fire by Michael O'Donnell, a really good book, really quick, exciting read. All right, number 3 on my list was one I came across, I think, on the resale shelf at my local library. But Blackhawk Down, A Story of Modern War by Mark Bowden. I knew this was something that really happened. I also knew it was a movie. I guess I never quite realized it was a book, though. So when I saw this on the shelf, I was like, I've got to get that. And I couldn't put it down. I read it, I think, in just a few days. And it's not, as you can see, it's not a short book. It's some 340 pages of reading. It's a historically accurate account of what happened, but at the same time, I would say it reads like a novel. And you just can't put it down. It's action-packed. But this really, really enjoyed Black Hawk Down. Black Hawk Down, though, it's a tough read, because you read it and you kind of have an idea. If you know anything about what happened, you kind of have an idea. Even the title kind of tells you where this is going. And as you're reading what happens, you start seeing little things here and there that because this happened, because they didn't do this, because of this mistake, it caused just these problems compounded, and it became worse and worse. Just something that I noticed in this isn't so much from the book, I guess it is, but just the importance of the little details, how a bunch of little tiny mistakes by themselves, not a big deal. But when you have one after another, and they start piling up, all of a sudden, you got a problem like this that happens. And that's what happens in this book. Well, if you've never read it, well worth the read. I've never seen the movie. Maybe I will one of these days. But Blackhawk Down, really good book. Really opens your eyes to just how terrible war is and how awful battle is, and how even whether it's guys who have never, soldiers who've never been in a fight before, or battle-hardened troops, battle's an awful thing. War's an awful thing, and this book does a very good job of exposing that. Next is just a little book. I actually found this as well by John Hershey called Hiroshima. It's a pretty unique book because it's actually something that was printed in newspapers. It's this story of what happened, and it's kind of told from the perspective of several different individuals that were there in Hiroshima when that first atomic bomb was dropped. Horrifying thing, horrifying account of what happened when that bomb was dropped. And it's told from the perspective of people who lived in the city who survived that bomb being dropped. A very interesting, but also a very, I guess, sobering read. Kind of like, I guess, the book, the Native Americans, the Mammoth Book of Native American Indians, or Native Americans. Some really interesting history, things I didn't know in here. But boy, it just shows you, once again, kind of like Blackhawk Down too, just how awful war is. And, that's something that's still being debated today. Dropping an atomic bomb on a city with, I think the estimates were maybe 200,000 people in this city. And I think the book says basically estimates were maybe, actually, I think it was maybe 300,000 or 400,000 people in the city. Maybe up to 100,000 people died. Maybe 150,000 were injured, something like that. The reports I've noticed, by the way, vary considerably. Even in this book, some of the numbers they vary depending on who the source is. But it's just like, even the morals of that is still being debated today. I've got another book I'm working on. I just started it, but it's called The Lesson. I could show it to you, but it's all backwards because I got my camera flipped. It's called The Lessons of Terror, A History of Warfare Against Civilians by Caleb Carr. And that book kind of goes along with this one. War has always been waged, and anytime war happens, whether you want it to or not, generally civilians are targeted at some point, intentionally or unintentionally. It generally always happens, and it's a horrible, horrifying thing. That's part of, that's not the only thing that makes war so terrible, but that's part of what makes war so awful, is you have stuff like this that happens. Older men and women, innocent civilians, children, babies die in war, because of war, either directly or indirectly. And that's part of what makes this so horrifying. But it's important, I think, to read books like this, because if we just close our minds to what has happened in the past, to history, the good and the bad, we're going to have a very skewed perspective toward the future and decisions that are made in the future. So, not a pleasant read, but I think books like Hiroshima, these first-hand accounts, are a very important read. So, a really good book. And then this one, Elon Musk, by Walter Isaacson. I actually started this book a while back and then just had things happen and I didn't get around to finishing it. So I said, you know what? Here in the month of June, I'm going to start over and I'm going to finish it. And I did. And I'm quite pleased with my accomplishment because this book is over 600 pages. It is an enormous book. If the book looks familiar, you have probably, maybe at some point you've seen the book on Steve Jobs that looks very similar to this, written by Walter Isaacson as well. I don't have the book on Steve Jobs. I hope I come across it at some point in one of these resale shops I go to because I'd like to have it. I really like Walter Isaacson, the way he writes. He's a good storyteller. He writes about these people without, and I mean, honestly, things that I don't understand. I mean, Elon Musk involved, electric cars in, spaceships and rockets in, Neuralink and AI, a lot of stuff I don't know much about. But Walter Isaacson writes about those things in such a way that it's like, okay, I'm not getting bored. I'm not getting so bogged down in details that I can't follow the story. So really, really good read, a unique perspective, and really an inside perspective on Elon Musk. Now, this book on Elon Musk, it came out just recently in 2023. In fact, the stories that he tells, what he covers in here, it goes all the way up to April of 2023. So, I mean, it covers, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. It covers, the Twitter acquisition. It obviously doesn't cover everything within the last year, but it covers a lot that happens when he acquires Twitter. Elon Musk is an interesting character. Folks like Steve Jobs and those other folks, they are all unique individuals. But hey, we're all unique, right? But Elon Musk, you read it, he's certainly, I guess to put it politely, he's certainly what you would call a jerk. But he also has, and I've been around folks who have various, he has like Asperger's is what he's got. And it's difficult for people to sometimes interact with people in a way that takes someone's emotions or feelings into consideration. So with Elon Musk, that is a factor in the way that he treats people. Maybe it's because he's a bit of a jerk, but it might also be the condition that he has. It makes it very difficult for him to take the feelings and the emotions of others into account while he is speaking or making decisions or doing things. So that's something that's interesting that you see in this book over and over again. It's like you read stuff, it's like, oh man, he's brutal in dealing with people. And a lot of people that work for him, even some of the ones that are, his, you might say his right hand men or women, even after a while, a lot of them, it's like, hey man, I gotta find something else to do. I gotta move on with my life. I can't do this anymore. So that's an interesting thing. He would be a very challenging person to work for, but, and Walter Isaacson points this out, the same as with Steve Jobs, there's no denying the results he gets. Look at what he has been able to accomplish in so many different fields. It's astounding. Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. If you ever come across that book, if you like reading biographies, pick up Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. You are really going to enjoy that book, I think, or at least you're going to learn a lot of interesting things if you pick it up. All right, and there's one final book. I don't actually have the hard copy of it with me because I checked it out from the library and I have since returned it. But it was Hondo by Louis L'Amour, a Western for June on the Range. That was the only Western that I actually completed this month. I've actually started several others, but that's the only one that I completed. I really liked it, enjoyed it. In fact, I went back and looked it up, and I didn't have any idea about any of Louis L'Amour's books. I was going through the library, and I was like, oh, Hondo, that one sounds interesting, looks interesting. I've also decided if I ever get a dog, I'm probably naming the dog Hondo, because what an awesome name for a dog that is. But I looked it up and realized, oh, Hondo is considered by some to be Louis L'Amour's best book. And it's fantastic. I also saw something recently that it's a movie. I think it's a John Wayne movie. So I'm going to have to check that out at some point, because Hondo was a fantastic book. I loved it. If I ever come across a copy of it in like a used bookstore, I'm going to pick it up because I really liked it. I also started reading a Zane Grey book for June on the Range, but I got about a chapter or two into it. I was like, this is not enjoyable. This is not an enjoyable read. So I guess I got one book done for June on the Range, which technically means I guess I participated in it. So there you go. Look forward to probably reading more Louis L'Amour books down the line. But that's another one to add on to the list, was Hondo by Louis L'Amour. All right, so that's everything I read in the month of June. I've got a few others that I'm actively reading right now, but I didn't want to throw something on this list that I hadn't finished reading. So I guess I read 6 books in the month of June. Several of them, though, were very long. So that was it's a lot of reading. But I really enjoyed it. I've actually picked up several books, and I'll show you those soon. But several military-related books, history-related, military-related books. Really interested in those. Really excited to show you those in a future video. Let me know what you have read in the month of June. If you're a booktuber and you have a video of what you've read in the month of June, hey, I'll be glad if you'll drop a link to that down in the comments below, and I'll be glad to check that out. Interested to see what you've been reading. So until then, y'all take care, and I'll see you next time.